Digital audio health by Cymatrax.
It's Al Cole from CBS Radio, and I want to tell you about a Renaissance woman who excels at everything she puts her innovative mind to. And you know, I'm going to start it out like this. What would you say if I told you that I was going to introduce you to a lady who is a very successful business entrepreneur and a world-class creative force as a realtor, interior designer, hosts charity golf tournaments for wildlife, and is the cutting-edge author of the stunning Magical Forces Within? Well, Al, I'd say make the introduction, brother. I've just been dying to learn some of all of those things from somebody who sounds like a real magnetic lady. Well, you're in luck, because not only can you learn about the fabulous life accomplishments of this woman, whose name happens to be Rhonda Grant, but week in and week out, Rhonda will introduce you to some of the most exciting guests on the planet as she hosts her own awesome podcast, The Rhonda Grant Show, on Contact Talk Radio. Week to week, Rhonda skillfully weaves the magical forces within her with the extraordinary discoveries in the sometimes ordinary lives of her guests, who blossom before your very eyes through the guidance and know-how of such a skilled and sensitive host as Rhonda Grant. You got to check it out. Check out all the action at rhondagrantauthor.com. That's rhondagrantauthor.com to witness the extraordinary discoveries in otherwise ordinary lives. And I hear some of you asking right now, well, Al, how do you know all this? I'll tell you. It's because I weave some of the same magic on my own nationally syndicated show called People of Distinction. It's all about humanity at its best. Every guest with extraordinary things to say about the magical forces within life itself. Get it? So check them out. The Rhonda Grant Show, Extraordinary Discoveries in Ordinary Lives, and People of Distinction, created by me, Al Cole from CBS Radio, now hosted by my amazing son, Benji Cole. You can check out People of Distinction on Apple Music, or email me for exciting updates on my music and my books too, especially Romance for Women on Amazon. Email me at al@alcoholic.com. You heard me right. That's AL at ALCOLEHOLIC.com. And I really want to thank my CBS radio listeners for coming up with that handle, Alcoholic. Seems like from day one, my listeners have been saying, Al, we love what you're doing there, brother. In fact, we're hooked on it. We're alcoholics. So here we go in classic form with a swing of a golf club as she hosts another charity golf tournament for wildlife and another incomparable Rhonda Grant show. So all together, everybody, here's Rhonda.
Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to the Rhonda Grant Show right now, and I have many great guests on the show, and I have a great guest coming up. If you've been searching for a deeper meaning in your life, go to Amazon and pick up my book, Magical Forces Within. You know, we're all ordinary people having extraordinary experiences, and we have a fantastic guest on the show today, Jane Blaufus, CLU, best-selling author, international speaker, and business coach. We're going to find out more about her extraordinary experiences. 1 minute. That's how fast you can lose a loved one, and then it's too late. A veteran of the life insurance industry, Jane has always thought that if anything unthinkable happened to her, she would be well prepared and able to handle it better than others would. Wrong. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Hi, Rhonda. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our time together.
Thank you. Me too. Well, please let us know about your experience around that powerful introduction.
One sunny Sunday morning, my daughter and I kissed my husband and her dad, of course, goodbye, and said, we'll see you later. And he ran down the stairs, yelled, I love you girls, and out the door he went. And I took my daughter to a arranged appointment that she had. He went off to another appointment. And later that day at around 1:30 in the afternoon, I was in my driveway talking to one of my neighbors when a police car pulled into the cul-de-sac that we lived on and went and parked in front of his house. And I joked with him because he'd been robbed 2 weeks before and they cleaned out his garage.
Oh,
And
dear.
I joked with him and said, haha, they figured out that you really didn't have a riding lawnmower for that patch of grass that you had. And so he laughed, went home. And about 5 minutes later, I'd sat back down to finish painting the fence that I was working on, turned the music back up. And I looked through the lattice that I was painting to see the police officer and my neighbor crossing the lawn in between our two houses. And I stood up and the police officer addressed me by name and asked me if we could go into the house. And I said, no, where's my husband? And he asked me again by name if we could go in the house. And I again said, no, where's my husband? You know, Rhonda, I had this insane notion in my head that if I didn't let this police officer enter my home, come across my threshold, then
Right.
he would tell me something bad. Anyway, he stood his ground and looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, ma'am, I regret to inform you that your husband was killed in an accident this morning. So in less than 60 seconds, I went from being a happily married, wife, mother, executive, daughter, whatever, to a widow with a 12-and-a-half-year-old and a financial tsunami coming my way.
Wow. I am so sorry. What happened next, Jane?
Oh, so many things happened. Some I remember, some I don't. Thank the Lord. I think God has a way of protecting, letting your brain kick in to protect your heart. But, all of the things that fall into place. And the most important one is notifying people. My daughter, actually, that morning, I put her on a plane from Winnipeg to go out to Victoria to visit my parents for her summer vacation. And so I had to call my parents. And I had to ask my parents to tell their only granddaughter that her father had been killed that morning. So that was call number one. Mm-hmm. Call number two was to my husband's family, but my in-laws were Hungarian immigrants. And when they got excited, they switched to Hungarian if they got excited or emotional. So I couldn't speak it. So I called my youngest brother-in-law, who broke the news to his family. And then the third call I made that day, because I've never been so terrified in my entire life, was to my life insurance advisor, was to ask him one question and one question only. And that's the question I've heard many widows and widowers ask is, are we going to be okay? Will we be all right? Mm-hmm. So that was sort of what started it. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that just some, as I said, some I remember, some I don't.
Mm-hmm. And where do you go from there when you found out, like, are we going to be okay? What happened to you and your life? How did it change? Like, it changed instantly, but how did that feel?
Well, it was as if a Mack truck had run me over and then backed up and did it again. Mm-hmm. It was a physical assault on my body. I felt like somebody had literally slammed me and knocked the breath right out of me. And I do remember one of the neighbor went and got another one of our neighbors who was a nurse. And I remember I finally realized I was crouched in a ball on the floor of the living room screaming, and she was sitting beside me, just gently rubbing my back to try to get me to calm down and I was shaking because it was just such a shock to the body that I couldn't handle it. And from there, I picked myself up off the floor, and then you have to put a whole series of things into motion. So I think I went into autopilot, to be quite honest with you. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. It was really kind of weird because the business side of my brain kicked in as well as the other side of my brain, because I was a businesswoman. I was in the financial services insurance business in particular. Okay. So I already had a lot of experience with other people in this area, not with me. So the business side kicked in and I started going, okay, so I have to make these calls. I have to do this. I have to do that. But people started, assembling around me to help me out. And I don't know. I just put, honest to goodness, Rhonda, I just put one foot in front of the other and hoped for the best.
Mm-hmm. And it must be a very vulnerable position to be in because now you're a single mom. Like your identity changed that day.
Totally.
You're now a single mom, and all the responsibility now is on your shoulders. And you found out, I think, quite quickly about your insurance policy and what that meant. And is that right? That you had in place?
Luckily, we had done some prior planning. We had actually sat down with our life insurance advisor the year before and done a complete review. We had our wills updated to make sure they were current. So that was all in place. But even though I had done that, I still got blindsided by a number of things that I found out about later. And plus, on top of it all, as I mentioned, I had a financial tsunami coming my way because, unfortunately, my husband and 3 passengers in a small plane were all killed in the same accident, and my husband was piloting the plane. So that didn't necessitate, but it brought upon me 6 months after he passed away, the first of 2 lawsuits, and within 2 years of the filing period, the third, because the other passengers' families, and I don't blame them, I guess, decided to sue the people that were involved that day. So you can prepare as much as you think you can prepare, but I never would have thought of something like that happening and that I needed to be prepared for that. So,
oh, no,
a lot of things,
not at all.
Yeah, a lot of things caught me off guard.
Well, and you have to wonder while you're going through all of this is how much can a person take with I mean, it must have been hard to sleep at night anyway, but to have all of this looming over you, it must have been really difficult.
Well, I didn't sleep well at night because every time I closed my eyes, my brain would conjure up. I never saw what the result of the accident was, but my brain would play tricks on me. So I was afraid of the dark for quite a while. It just was not a good place for me to be. But my brain just kept, like I said, going in and out of, okay, I have to do this, and this, and then no, I can't cope. I just leave me alone. So what I ended up doing, Rhonda, was I tell people this, I put on the Superwoman tape and I tied it really tight, darn near choking myself. And to the world at large, I looked like Jane, who had it all together. Jane, the executive, the whatever, I had it to the world at large. I had it all together, but inside I was absolutely dying. Absolutely dying.
Oh, I guess you were.
I was grieving, yet I was forced into a position where he wouldn't tell me his final wishes. So I was trying to figure out what to do. And it just was like every time I turned a corner, somebody had their hand out asking me for money instead of my life insurance advisor was the only one who handed me any money because everybody wanted the bills paid.
Right.
It's strange things like calling up the utility company and finding out that my name was not on the invoice. So I couldn't, this is one thing I say to people, get both your names on all of the utility bills because they won't deal with you. The funeral director asked me how many death certificates I wanted. And I looked at him like a deer in the headlights, Rhonda, and I said, 1. He goes, I'll give you 15 to start. If you need more, come back.
Yes, exactly. And why do you need those? Tell the audience, Jane, why do you need those death certificates? Why are they so important?
Because it's proof of death. And it's the only thing that releases them to allow them to deal with you.
Yes.
But as I said, in the case of the utilities, it would have been much easier if my name had been on the invoices because they would have dealt with me. Like I remember calling up his credit card company and speaking to them and saying, I'm calling to tell you that my husband's passed away. And, somebody choked out I'm sorry, and then went right into the spiel about, well, here's the balance. We'll lock the interest as of today, but this is what you owe. And that was it. It was like, just write a check and send it in. So the death certificate is the final proof of, yes, I have the authority to deal with you. And, I had to go back and ask for 10 more death certificates.
Exactly.
I ended up having to give out 25 different death certificates in order to get the estate in proper order to get it, cleared up and finalized. So it was
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the lawyer needs it for the home because they need to know that your husband has died or the wife has died so that the person who's remaining can actually list that home, sell that home. Because if you don't have that death certificate, you're not doing anything without that other signature, right?
No. And, I went to see a therapist after everything happened because I needed somebody who didn't know me to talk to.
Yes.
Because I couldn't talk to my parents. They were grieving. I certainly couldn't talk to my 12-year-old. And she said to me, one of the three toughest things that you will now face as you move forward with your life is, one will be selling and moving out of the matrimonial home. 2 would be leaving the province. And 3 would be remarriage, usually in that order. I've done all 3.
In probably a short period of time, did you?
It wasn't, actually, the first 2 were within about 3 years, and remarriage was about 7 years later and whatever. I'm happily remarried to a wonderful man, but he was married to our girlfriend that we lost to cancer.
Oh, okay.
So, 2 widows and a child who lost her father under one roof. It really does happen, folks.
It really does. And it's not until, it's really a wake-up call. It just really grounds you with a reality that you don't want to face, but you have to face. Because I know that people say when they have car crashes or things like that, it snaps them into now. It stops time moving along. It stops that decision making, and you're in a survival. You're just trying to survive. And it's hard for people to understand what you're going through unless they've been going through it themselves. And quite frankly, a lot of people don't even know what to say to you. Did you find that?
Oh, I know this young lady meant well, but I've never forgotten this. I remember sitting on a couch somewhere, and it came out as to what had happened, or she knew what had happened. And she turned to me and put her hand on my arm and said, "I totally understand what you're going through. My cousin just miscarried." And it was everything I could do to not say anything to her, because I know she meant well. And it's to your point. Most people have no idea what to say to you. They just don't know how to react. And that's why I always say to people, when you're sending a card or you want to send a note or say something, I always say, just put a little note in that says, "May time heal the pain, but may it never dim the wonderful memories that you shared." And a lot of people.
Beautiful. Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? That is just beautiful.
May time heal the pain, but may it never dim the wonderful memories you have shared. And I have had so many people say to me, "Oh my goodness, that was amazing." And the other thing too, another thing I'll add here is, a lot of people are afraid to use the deceased name because if they call the person by name, it will bother you. It's exactly the opposite. If you don't use their name, that bothers us more, because it's as if they never existed.
Right. I get that for sure.
It's as if they never existed. So don't hesitate to use the person's name. Don't use it repeatedly, but it's all right to mention our loved ones by name.
Did you have a pivotal point where you felt things changing and that you had a little bit more control over your life and not as afraid and as vulnerable?
I think that pivotal point came 10 years after he passed away, when the lawsuits were finalized. Because until then, exactly, I had one foot stuck in the door of the past, so I could never totally just start to move forward. I was always looking in the rearview mirror, wondering, was I going to be living on the corner of the street in a tent penniless, or was I going to be okay? Thankfully, it worked out that it was the latter. But I remember the day I got the verdict and found out what had happened. I cried so violently that I thought that truck had come back that I mentioned earlier and hit me again. And my second husband had to take the phone from me and talk to the lawyer, because I was hyperventilating. I was crying so hard, and I didn't realize all the stress that I had been carrying in my body for 10 years. 10 years.
That's a
that
long
was-
time to carry that. And
it's a very, very long time. And that for me, I guess, would be a pivotal point when I went, okay, now I can close that door and look at what the future looks like. There were some other things along the way, but having you ask me that question, it just hit me up the side of the head that probably was the most pivotal moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's so cathartic, and lots of times, and you may have felt this, you may not have felt this, but I find that when something solves itself, gets solved, or I solve it, and my body, you carry stuff in your body, and you just take a big, deep breath. And I mean, I'm not comparing that to what you went through, but the understanding is that we do carry things in our body. And then when we find out the results, we just exhale, right? And you must have had such a freedom, especially when you didn't realize that would be your reaction, plan that reaction, or anything like that, is that you must have had such a freedom going forward.
Yes, I did. But the interesting thing is I didn't have it right away.
Okay.
I had carried this around for so long that I didn't just exhale and it went away. It still took a while to actually believe what I had been told, because I got this long email from the lawyer. And of course, the lawyer writes in lawyer jargon. And I phoned the lawyer and I said, okay, all I want you to tell me is this what I think this means? He said, yes. And that's when I lost it.
Right.
So took me a while to feel comfortable and confident and to believe what I'd been told. Then I was able to start to feel the freedom and move forward, but it didn't come immediately.
Okay. Well, you've been through a tremendous amount. Tell me about your book that you wrote.
Well, the book is our story.
Okay.
I'll go back to something I mentioned to you earlier. I was so blindsided by so many things that came my way afterwards. I thought, okay, I'm in the insurance industry. I've got training, knowledge, expertise. I have a designation. If I was blindsided by all of this, what does the average person go through?
Perfect. Thank you.
So I thought, okay, I'm supposed to pay this forward. And I decided that I wanted to share the story to help one family never to have to go through what we went through. So I approached my daughter, who was 22 at the time, and I said, this is what I'm planning on doing. I said, do you want me to tell your story, or do you want to write your story? My daughter is a provincial level debater, and communications and English is her first, whatever. Yeah. So she went away, thought about it for 2 weeks, and came back and said, no, Mom, I think I'll write my own story. And I talked to my second husband, because as I mentioned, he was married to my girlfriend we lost to cancer, and there's a story there as well. So under one roof, we've been exposed to a whole bunch of things that most families never have to deal with under one roof. So we wrote the story and we put it out there, and something happened. It grew legs. It took on a life of its own, because people started talking about it and telling people about it. And then my readers came back to me and said, one of the things, by the way, in the back of the book is a 33-page master checklist on how to have courageous conversations. I'm coined as a catalyst for courageous conversations.
Awesome.
And the conversation starts with yourself. What do you want? As I mentioned, my husband would never tell me what his final wishes were. So it's like he handcuffed me and blindfolded me and made me walk down this, road without knowing where I was going. So then you have to, how do you talk to your loved ones? How do you start this conversation? Because it's not your usual Friday night dinner conversation is, what happens if I die tomorrow or become disabled? And then how do you work with the professionals you need to engage, like financial advisors, lawyers, accountants? I highly recommend people pre-plan their own funerals, please, just please. And so born out of the checklist, my readers came back to me and said, I love this checklist, but you keep telling me to get all this documentation together to have this, and I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. What do I do? Help, help, help. So I built a companion planning binder to help people to have a simple roadmap to follow. So they came together, and here we are, third edition. I've now had the pleasure and the honor of speaking around the world.
You have, yes.
My binder is in a Canadian and a US version. If you had told me when I was growing up that I would be where I am today, I would have asked you if you were okay. I was artsy.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
in the fashion world. So
Right.
but here I am.
And you wrote the book as well.
Wrote the book, shared the story, and my daughter did write her own chapter, and
Fantastic.
brilliantly. You know, her claim to fame is, if mom doesn't get you by chapter 7, I'll get you in chapter 8. And there's a disclosure that we should really put out with the book. Do not read this in public. You will either be laughing out loud or crying. And that's what people say. Why didn't you tell me I shouldn't read this in public? So
Right.
it's hitting, I don't know, it's making a difference.
It sure is. It sure is. You're listening to the Rhonda Grant Show right now, whose podcast has been treated with digital audio health by Cymatrax. And I am speaking with Jane Blaufus, who is a best-selling author, international speaker, and coach. The name of her book is called With the Stroke of a Pen. And please let the listeners know how they may reach you, Jane. Contact you.
Thank you. And then the full name of the book is With the Stroke of a Pen, Claim Your Life, just because they have to go together.
Okay.
The only place you can get my book is off my website. So it's www.janeblaufus.com. And that's where you can find both the book and the binder. And Rhonda, if I may, I'd love to offer your listeners today, if they're interested, I'd be happy to offer free shipping as a gift from me, because you've been so gracious having me on as a guest today.
Well, that is wonderful. And so how would they contact you in order to get that?
They just go onto the website, onto the page that says shop, and they can order it directly on there, and it will prompt them and walk them through. We'll pick up all the information we need. And if anybody wants to talk to me or has a question, drop me a note in the info at the Blaufus group. There's a contact page on the website as well. And I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out.
Well, that's wonderful. So I encourage our listeners to do that, because Jane is an absolute wealth of knowledge in this. I know it's a tender subject, and I know we don't like to speak about it, but the best thing is to ask Jane to ship this out to you, so that you and your loved ones can be prepared when this type of thing happens in your life. What extraordinary discoveries have you found in your life, Jane?
Well, one was that I didn't have to be Superwoman. It was okay to take the Superwoman cape off and to ask for help, because it's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And I think the biggest thing is, it took me until I was 55 to figure out who I was supposed to be when I grew up. So it's okay if you don't find that out until later in life.
Yes, I know.
But I think one of the biggest things, Rhonda, was once I sort of followed the bouncing balls through my life and I put all the dots together, I realized that everything I've been through during my life to this point was preparing me for the mission that I'm on now. And my mission is that I was preparing to help people to get their personal and financial lives in order while they can. And I'm on a mission to help people to cut through the fear and to have these courageous conversations, so that if, God forbid, the time comes, they're prepared, and all they have to do is focus on either caring for a loved one who might be ill or taking care of themselves and their family if they've lost someone. That's my fondest wish in life, that I can help with the work that I've been doing.
And how does the workbook help them?
The workbook takes the guessing out of it. And
Fantastic.
I have a lawyer who uses it in estate planning, and he said, this is the most this is the easiest roadmap in 35 years of estate planning I've ever seen. All people have to do is just follow he called it the bouncing ball himself, and just fill in the blanks, but to make sure that they revisit it on a regular basis and not just do it once and put it on the shelf. It has to be a living, breathing document that gets updated and all of that. But I wanted to take the angst out of having to do it.
Because people usually find out as they go along, and then that knowledge again is lost because they don't transfer it to someone else. They're just surviving during those times, and they don't have the presence of mind to say, listen, if this happens to you, you know what I mean? People don't do that. So I'm so pleased that you have developed this program that people can it's a checklist that people can go through and make sure that they have their house in order, really.
It is. And you just touched upon something that I'd like to pick up on. Is one of the things we must think about is what if we lose our ability to communicate with people towards the end of something as to what our wishes are, because we may have lost our own voice.
Right.
This is the voice. This binder, this checklist is the voice, as are prepared wills, powers of attorney, living wills, all of those sorts of things. This is all about a legacy of love, Rhonda.
Yes, perfect.
I don't know about you, but I'd like my legacy of love to be that Mom was prepared, Jane was prepared, and I didn't have to try to figure all of this out when I couldn't ask her any questions. I'd like it to be my gift to the ones that I love, that I left this world. My motto is we have an obligation to ourselves and to those we love to leave this world in an organized manner. We have no right to leave chaos behind. That's my mantra. You have
beautiful sayings, for sure. Yes, I mean, it must be extraordinarily difficult to have the shock that you went through, to be in the grief that you were in, and then have to deal with everything, because for some reason you've got to pull a part of you to the forefront in order to deal and set yourself aside. And a lot of people have to do that, and a lot of people recognize those words. But if you think about, if your loved ones can be prepared, then it entitles you to your grief. It entitles you to that time that you need, because you need the grief in order to heal and in order to move forward. And if it's all jumbled up with making plans and answering questions and getting death certificates and all that sort of stuff, and changing your utilities and all those things that you have to take care of, it's going to be a whole lot easier.
Well, and it also, you've got to remember that life goes on, and with life comes anniversaries and things like that. So my husband was he died in July. Right. Turned 40 in August. It was our wedding anniversary in September. It was my birthday in October. It was Thanksgiving. It was my daughter's birthday, December 22nd. It was Christmas. It was New Year's. And in January, I literally had a nervous breakdown sitting in my office one Friday afternoon. I lost it. Oh, I've never been so scared in my entire life. And thankfully, I had a good support network around me of friends and family who pulled me out of the black hole that I felt I was never coming out of. And that was also another pivotal point when, after, I had help from family again, I changed a few things up, and then I started to come out the other side, but it was scary.
Very scary.
Very scary.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing. It's very difficult to share those types of intimate moments and tender moments that you've had. Do you feel that you've been called, Jane, to your mission?
Yes, I do. I do. And I'm not trying to be, super religious or anything like that. I just know why God put me on the face of the earth. I figured it out. Like I said, it took me until 55 to figure out, but I know exactly why I'm here. A very good friend of mine said to me even last week, don't you wish this had all come sooner in your life? And I said, it wasn't able to, because I had to live my life in order to have the story. All of these things had to happen in the order that they happened in order for me to be able to tell the story and to help others like I do today. And she goes, I never thought of it that way, but you're 100% right. And so, like I said, the bouncing balls. I was
Yes,
literally, Rhonda, do we have a minute so I can just share a quick little story as to how I realized?
absolutely. Please.
Sitting in my office, sitting at my desk, and I had the story on one side, and I was starting to build the checklist in a separate document on the other side. And I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden I looked up heavenward and I went, okay, I've got it. I've got it. I've got it. Stop beating me on the head. It hurts. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to put the story and the checklist together because I didn't want people just to pat me on the arm and say, sorry for your loss and walk away. I wanted to affect change. I wanted to not disturb, but I wanted to shake people out of their shoes enough to get them to say, I have to do something about this. As soon as I put the two of them together, I wrote and published the book from start to it in my hands in 6 months, which is not the norm.
No, it's not.
And then the binder came later. That took me 5 months and I nearly lost all my hair pulling it out, trying to put it together. But anyway, I just knew that I was put here to share this because I'd been in the insurance business. All of the dots came together. And that's when I realized that that's why I'm here. And that's what I'm supposed to do is pay this forward and be a voice for change and for people getting their personal and financial lives in order while they can.
Mm-hmm. And we just can't drive it home any harder than that. I mean, as we are having this podcast, and it's going to stay around for a long time, is that there are many people out there who do not have their wills done. And you need to have your will done because those are your wishes, as Jane has said. They do have the kits in different stores. I do recommend a lawyer, wouldn't you, Joan?
I would totally recommend a lawyer because a friend of mine is a lawyer and said the largest litigation case she has ever defended was around a $29.99 will that somebody downloaded off the internet. It took 10 years to finalize the estate and destroyed the estate. The lawyers are worth their weight in gold. You hear about credit cards being priceless. These professionals are priceless. And also make sure that your will is up to date. It's amazing how many times people pass away with the wrong beneficiaries on things.
Yes.
Or their executor is predeceased them.
Exactly.
Like not planning that you do and stick in a drawer and never pull out again. This is a living, breathing, changeable document. These are documents that need to be upgraded. And, thank goodness for proper planning for us, because as I told you, there was all the fallout from the accident. I can't stress enough how valuable a professional's advice can be, especially when it comes to, financial and legal.
Well, yes, because it's an investment, a very small investment, a few $100s, and it protects your estate. It protects your money. It protects who you want your valuables to go to. Because if you don't have that, we don't know, nobody knows how long it's going to take to clean up your estate, make these things happen, and disperse the money.
Exactly. And to the right and
people,
rightful heirs of it. I always say a financial advisor, think of it this way, Rhonda, a financial advisor is the person who can put money in motion. And the lawyer is the one who makes sure that that money legally goes to the beneficiaries and the people it's deemed and supposed to go to. And the accountant makes sure that the tax authority get their due, but not anything more than they need to. It breaks my heart when I see how many times there's money that goes into taxes that did not need to go that way because it just wasn't properly planned to go to in the appropriate order. So that's why I say, don't be afraid of talking to professionals. And if you don't know who to start with, ask people that you know, like, and trust who they work with to recommend you to somebody. And women, I'm a big proponent of women getting their affairs in order. Do you know, 91% of women are predicted to be responsible for their own, the home's finances at some point in their life. 91%. Be you 22 years old, be you 92 years old. And it's important that we as women know what's going on. We are involved in the decisions. We understand what the ramifications are. We ask questions, and we do not, I jokingly, well, I don't really jokingly say, but I've said this many times, a man is not a plant.
Well, yeah. And the thing is the stats are there that men die before women. Mm-hmm. I once, here's a little story. I'm a realtor, and I had to go and meet a client who was with his mom, visiting his mom, who was in an elderly home. And as I walked down the hall, it was a beautiful retirement home. As I walked down the hall, all I saw was name tags that were women's names. And I was reading the names and reading a long hallway. And I came to the number that I needed to, and her name matched it, knocked on the door. And my burning question, which I ended up asking while I was there, was, is this a woman's floor? Mm-hmm. Well, no, it wasn't the woman's floor. This was a big retirement home. And I think there were 6 men in the retirement home that all of the women were fighting over. But I'm saying, there's your example. Women really need, and I agree with what you're saying. Well, of course I agree with what you're saying, because you're a professional and you do this for a living. But it's just to strike a chord with people, that, especially women, that they need to take care of business. They need to be involved. They need to know. And if they don't have a will, they must take their men and march them to their lawyer's office and get it done.
The other thing, yes, I totally agree with you. The other thing too that women need to be really thinking about is long-term care. Is because of what you just said about outliving, we on average outlive a man our age by 7 years.
Okay.
So, there's family dynamics have changed. There's a lot of women today whose children don't live close to them. They might live in Europe. They might live across Canada. And I'm finding a lot of women have a very small social circle. And anyway, your social circle shouldn't be responsible for taking care of you. So one of the things women really need to be cognizant of and thinking about is, if God forbid something happens to me and I need long-term care help, where am I going to get it? And where am I going to get the money to pay for it? Because long-term care is extremely expensive. So there's such a thing as long-term care insurance. So if you're dealing with a financial advisor, I highly recommend you have a conversation about that, because that again is worth its weight in gold.
Right. So before we wrap up the show, let the listeners know how they may reach out to you again, Jane.
If you would like to take advantage of the tools that are available, the book and the binder, again, it's at my website, janeblaufus, BLAUFUS.com. And again, you can drop me a note on the contact page on my website if you've got any questions, if I can be of help, if I can make any recommendations. If you're looking for a financial advisor and don't have one, I'm not a practicing financial advisor today, but I have a huge network and I'm happy to introduce or make introductions. But you know what? I'm more than happy to help anybody where I can, or if you just want to have a little conversation, just drop me a note.
Well, thank you very much. You're so approachable, and I hope that people reach out, and I hope that people do take the advice that we've talked about on the podcast. It's just been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for spending this time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I've enjoyed every moment of being with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jane. Theme song coming up for the Rhonda Grant Show is Sun on the Water, composed and performed by my friend John Park Wheeler. This is Rhonda Grant with the Rhonda Grant Show, author of Magical Forces Within, Extraordinary Discoveries in an Ordinary Life, inviting you to look for the magical forces within yourself today and every day. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rhonda Grant Show with your host, Rhonda Grant. If you would like to find out more information about Rhonda and her upcoming guests and the work that she does, go to her website, rhondagrantauthor.com. That's rhondagrantauthor.com.